Alright, this is something that you'll need for this next step. This is called a seam ripper. You get it at a Walmart or probably any sewing supply store. But we need to take this old seat cover apart so that we can create a template of it. And the seam ripper is really just about this, cutting these stitches so that we can take the seat cover apart. We don't want to cut it apart because we need to know how much material is past this seam. There's quite a lot of sewing in here. Once you get it started, it'll go a whole lot easier. It's the getting it to start coming apart that's tough. There we go. Let's see, it's starting to rip apart now. And now I can go in between and get only the threads that are really holding it together. I'm not going to worry about this little scrap right here. I'm just cut that. If it starts to tear the vinyl, you're going to want to go back to the seam ripper. Alright, so we got a seam here. So this is one piece that we will wind up tracing. The seat is symmetrical, so we really only need to be able to measure up half of the seat. That's how we're going to deal with the giant hole in the cover. Because I'm going to find the halfway mark between each side, and it'll be I'll just make a mirror image of it when I start making the pattern. Usually there's a 1/2 inch. We're going to do everything by 1/2 inch, which means I'm going to need to add to this when I make the pattern. But typically in most sewing projects you want a 1/2 inch where you fold it. And this looks like it's a little over 1/4 of an inch. Because we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to stitch it. We'll fold the fabric over, and then we'll run another stitch on it to make it so that it's good and sturdy. But when you're not a professional, having that 1/2 inch will help you with being sloppy with your sewing machine, so that you'll actually still get the material that you need to get. There we go. If this was a 1/2 inch, we would just trace this. I'm still going to trace it, but I just have to add some. Alright, so I still need to split this seam so I can unfold this. See, there's a 1/2 inch there. But I need to make it so I can unfold this and then trace it on our tracing cloth. Alright, I've got the tracing cloth laid out. And now I will trace this onto it. This is the piece that was definitely at least a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to definitely trace that edge. And then, seems like after it gets around this corner, it gets thin. So, I think that I will just go ahead and fold that back under and try to maintain the same gap here to get us that 1/2 inch. It's better to have more fabric than less, so if you go over 1/2 inch, that's all right. And this one's already, it wasn't folded. The other piece is folded over the top of it, but I'm going to add to it too to try to have that 1/2 inch. Okay. Kind of hard to see the line, I'm sure. Okay, this tracing cloth has the squares on one side, not the other. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have it so that our squares are the outside of the seat. So that when I make the second copy of this, it needs to be traced basically so that instead of like this, it's like that. And how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to fold this over. Let's see if I can see through it enough. And it looks like I can. So I'm just going to trace this. I don't recommend trying to cut it without it having a line, like trying to cut it while it's folded like this, because one side could shift while you're using your scissors, and then the pattern will be all off, and your seat cover won't fit properly. Now, I'll cut these out. A more efficient person would probably only do the one and then use it to cut both pieces out of the vinyl. But I'm not a professional. I'm not always that efficient. And I do make mistakes. So I'm hoping that this can prevent me from screwing it up and making two left sides. Because my plan is to have the side with the squares printed on it represent the outside of the fabric, then that means when I go to lay this on the back side of my vinyl to draw these shapes onto the vinyl, I have to put it face down like that and then trace around it on the vinyl. And that'll give me that piece. Alright, so I have both ends and the front traced now. Now it's time to do this top surface. It did rip as I was going. Now, you'll see there's a big hole. But I'm lucky that this has a pattern that's symmetrical. And so, I'm gonna check to see if it seems that it is indeed symmetrical by lining up these stitches, pinching it together, fold it over, and there's these, you can see this is symmetrical. So that's all I needed to do was find out that I can just fold it there and cut it in this middle to have one good piece that I can then trace one side, flip it over, trace the other side, and then I'll have a complete seat bottom on a template that I can use on the vinyl. Alright, now that I've got my templates, I need to take my vinyl and lay it out. Like so. And then we need to place the templates on top of it, our patterns. So we're going to see if we can figure out a way to get all of the pieces that we need out of this one piece of vinyl. This is 2 yards that I bought at Hobby Lobby at $10 a yard. With a 40% off coupon, it's $6 a yard. So that's the seat cushion. This is the front edge of the seat. And then we have the 2 ends. I had previously stated to make them so that the squares would represent the surface of the vinyl, so that I put the squares down so that I don't wind up with the same shape, because you're going to really be upset with yourself if you make 2 left pieces and don't have enough vinyl to make the rest that you need. So I now know that this will all fit. Time to trace them. It can be handy to just run it right up to the edge to minimize your cutting. I already gave that 1/2 inch variance to the spaces that needed it, so I don't really want to make it any larger than these patterns. This also has made it so that I don't need to put that nasty, dirty, rodent urine covered seat pieces on my nice new vinyl. And this stuff is durable. I can just fold it up and save it for later. I could mark it, left side, right side, everything, 1966 GMC. I'd have it all for the next time that I want to make a seat cover. I'll run this edge up against this one to minimize my cutting. Maybe. Alright, I got all of the patterns down, and I'm going to cut. I suggest a new pair of scissors. This is not new, but I try to limit what they get used for. Scissors you use on paper will not cut cloth so well anymore. Paper dulls it. But nice sharp shears can also make it so that you can just guide it without snipping, just like that. Just get your direction started, hold both sides, and just follow your line. So there's one nice new side. When you're doing these seats, you want to get upholstery thread. I don't know if you can read it on there. Hobby Lobby doesn't really carry it. I got this at Joann Fabrics. Alright, if you're not familiar with the sewing machine, this is how we're going to load the bobbin. Bobbin is the spool that goes underneath for the back side of your stitches. So we're going to follow our directions here. We'll go through here for number one, and then we got to loop through this, underneath this. So it's just drawn right on top. And now we got to feed this through here, like so, and then back through that center so that the peg it sits on holds it in place. Push it down, push that over, snip this off so it doesn't get tangled. And now with that over, when we hit the treadle, it should just start spinning it up if I turn it on. And I'll guide it because, like right now, it's trying to build too much on one end, so now I'm making it build at the top. Let it come back down. I'm just going to fill it till it stops because we're going to use a lot. Now I'll just cut this off here. You need to pull this little bit out, snip that off. The bobbin is done. It's going to go in here. It has another showing. It shows you which way it's wound. So you need to match that wind. It just drops down in there, and then I use my thumbnail here to help me guide it as I pull it over to get it underneath this little edge. So the bobbin is done. Now we need to follow the diagram for feeding this. So one is right here. I'm going to go underneath that. I keep tension on it with my finger. There's an arrow for 2 going down here. There's an arrow for 3 going up. Turn until we get this up to the top for feeding it. So now we're going to come up here. And this is spot number 4. So to do that, we go to this side as we go up. And we come around to this side going down. Now it's hooked in there. And now just pull it further. Put it underneath this hook down here by the needle. And then if we drop the foot, we have a needle threader. Come down, and push this right here. I don't always get this on the first try. Alright, you can kind of see the little loop right here that the threader pulled that little loop through. So now I have to pinch it. I have to try and pinch that. So I'll use this finger to push it over to the other fingers, and then I'll grab it, and then I'll pull on it. You see it's getting a little bigger. There it goes. Now we'll just pull it through. So now the needle is threaded. Put that back up. Get this through the slot on the foot. Feed it underneath. And now we got to get this bobbin thread to thread through the machine. So you hold this with the hand, with your left hand, and right hand turn the gear knob to feed the needle down. And when it comes up, it's going to bring that bobbin thread. I don't know if you can see it, but you'll watch the thread cross the bobbin. Pulls the bobbin thread down under. There we go. And you have to keep a pinch on that, otherwise you'll lose the bobbin thread. Now just slide the scissors underneath here, and it pulls that bobbin thread out. Now the machine is threaded. Put the bobbin cover back on. Now it's ready to sew. Alright, most of the sewing I'm going to do is using that 1/2 inch guide. Our first stitch is supposed to be 1/2 inch from the edge of the material. So that would be like right about here, depending on where you move this needle. So I always move the needle all the way to that side to give me maximum foot here. Otherwise, if I had it over here, I'd have a lot extra over here. It's harder for me to gauge that by sight. But over here I can. And there's marks on your sewing machine usually that this is millimeters, but I found that right there on this first mark, if my needle's all the way that way, is about 1/2 inch. So that's what I'll stick with for my first stitch. When we do our second stitches on everything, it will probably be 1/4 inch. Could be maybe even 1/8 inch. So, but right now I need to just test my stitch and see if I like the stitch that I've got going on. So that's what this is for, is just testing my stitches. You need to hold these threads or the machine will pull them through and you'll have to re-thread things. So just hold those threads, drop your foot, get it started. Oh, see, I need to change this. Right now it's set on this one. I need straight stitch. So that's this knob down on the bottom. And we just turn that. Now it's a straight stitch. 215. So depending on which one I'm doing, it's that. But this is what I'm using. So now it's already started the stitch, so I don't have to hold those now. Now I'll just let it go and see how it's looking. And that's a pretty tiny stitch. So I want a much bigger stitch. You want as big a stitch as your machine will do, pretty much. On a good machine, that'll be 1/4 inch, and that's perfect for upholstery. This machine will not do 1/4 inch. Whenever you stop, you need to stop with the needle up, and you want that up. I always kind of just turn this to make sure it's there. Flip your foot up, and you should be able to pull it. If it doesn't pull out, turn that until it will. You want it to come out freely. We'll cut it off and look at what we have here. So you can kind of see it makes like a little bit of a zigzag if I pull it just right, so you can see the size of my stitches. Nice stitches are maybe 3/16 of an inch. They're just not quite enough for upholstery, but if you start having really tight stitches, all you're really doing is sawing through your vinyl. These bigger stitches are going to be better for vinyl. I'm going to get a better machine at some point, but this is what I have, so this is what I have to work with. Alright, so we need to see how these went together when it was an actual seat cover. So this is the front panel. This is the side that was stitched to the top. This is the side that was clipped to the seat frame. This is the side panel that came from this side. You can see when we tore the threads, this was underneath, so that means it was like this. And so if we flip this over, you can see how they sewed it. So it was first sewn together like this. So after they did their first stitch, they then flipped it over, which made this fold here, and then they came through and made their next stitch, and that's that 1/8 inch that I was talking about. They did like 1/4 and then 1/8. We're going to do 1/2 and then 1/8. You'll also see that these panels are exactly the same from end to end, and on my new panels they are not. So when I line this up here and I go there, I have a little extra distance here, and there's a reason for that I did this. It's because there's extra padding in the seat now, and this has to stretch underneath the frame, and I have to have enough to hold on to when I put those weird little clips back on it. So I'm just going to leave it like that. You have to remember that this is the surface with the seat top. So as long as we have that even on both ends, we'll be good, because then the excess will be on the part on the underneath the seat. So we're going to start with this. Now we're going to start sewing this. We're going to do the 1/2 inch variance here. We can't just start sewing and go in a straight line, which, I mean, we're going to go in a straight line, but you can't just start and go, because it'll unravel at the end. So we have to do what they call a back stitch to lock it in. So you want your bobbin and needle threads long enough out here to the side where you can stop them from moving. We want to start a little ways in here, and then go back, and then we just go straight. So I'm going to put the material right where I need it. I'm going to drop the foot. I'm going to hold these. You don't have to hold them so tight that the needle doesn't move, but you got to keep them from getting drawn inside. So we'll just do a couple stitches, and then we're going to press that down, and we're going to go backwards. There we go. Now we can do this whole side. You can see my cut wasn't all that even, because, you know, it wasn't straight, but the stitching is the part where it really counts. I'm going to back stitch it right there and call that good. Lift that up, pull this out, and snip that off, snip that off. And now get those out of the way, because if these get tangled up, it'll lock up your needle, and you'll be dead in the water, and then you'll have a big knot that you have to untie. A little bit more slack there. Alright, so now this will be opened up like this, and then it has to get folded over. You can see that this doesn't line up all that great. I'm not a professional. I do what I can, but I made sure that I have that 1/2 inch, and that allows me to use more of it or less of it if I need to, and that's what I'm going to do. So now we're going to do that 1/8 inch. I'm just going to roll this portion up to get it to feed through here. It's supposed to fold towards the front, like that. So you want to make sure it folds towards the front, and you want to make sure this is tight. We're going to slide this in here. And we're going to do the back stitch again. But I'm going to drop this. Now I'm going to run this edge against the edge of my foot. But I need to move the needle over to the other side. Now the edge of the foot to where the needle goes in, that's going to be about 1/8 of an inch. So as long as I keep going along this edge, I want to be able to hold those threads. Hold this tight, and let's let it go. All right, a little bit of a back stitch just to lock it, and now we'll feed this through. Make sure as you go that your fabric does not go underneath. You don't want to sew extra pieces in there. And also the machine is kind of struggling right now. When I hold it tight, it cannot pull it through, so I have to guide it through too. Because that's what you get when you don't have a professional machine. See, it's not moving. So I gotta force feed it. This material's kind of slippery. Good thing is though, is if I do force feed it more, I can probably get a bigger stitch. It's really struggling. Now we're in back stitch. No, I can't. Maybe I can pull it. No, it's just going to bunch up on me. We will be stitching right over that, so it'll be alright. Clip that garbage out of there. Okay. You can see how tight some of these stitches are where it got away, and that's where I was able to feed it. This material is just way too slick. And it didn't help that as it was going through, this is slick too, so the whole thing just cannot put enough tension on it to move it. Wasn't expecting that, but that's what we got. So there's our front edge. This will be about shaped like that when it goes in. Alright, go ahead and stop. Alright, so we got to make the new piece look like this old piece before I can start sewing the top on. So this goes around the hinge area. So we're just going to have to fold this and stitch it. I made it longer on the bottom, so hopefully it'll line up about right when we get up here to the top. Feed that in there. I'm going to slide this over. Put the foot down. Back stitch it. There. I gotta kind of pull the material. If you can keep the thing moving slow, you can get much bigger stitches out of it. But it's really hard with this cheap machine to keep it slow. It's like not a very intuitive foot pedal. Stitch it. There we go. Not exactly the same, but again, how many times do I gotta tell you, I'm not a professional at this. I'm just a guy that can do a few things. I'm showing you what I can do. Okay, I've got my completed front and sides. Next important thing is to find the center of it. And I did that by folding it, lining up these seams, and there's my center. I put a Sharpie mark on it. I did the same thing for the bench seat top. And if you see the holes in here already, that's because I already screwed it up. I wasn't thinking, and I just started sewing from the end. And we can't do that. We have to start from the middle. So we're going to line these up like this. Turn them face to face, just like before. Line up the center. Start at the middle, work our way to the end, and then we'll do the other side. Make sure your lines are still together. I had added extra material to the back of the seat cover to make it easier to put it onto the frame and have some material to grab while I do it. And that's kind of threw off why when I started at the end, it really screwed it up. Made me about 6 inches short on one side. And then I remembered this is how you're supposed to do it. So here we go. Now I don't want to cut new holes and make this thing weak, so I'm actually going to go a little over that 1/2 inch just to prevent that from happening. Backtrack it. Alright, well, that's good. So for now, I'm just kind of guiding along to the side of this. We gotta pull this in to line it up. Hold it good. Professional would have pins in there holding it. Every time you stop like this, you need to make sure that that needle is down so that your material doesn't slide out. Now we're working along one side of the seat. Lift the foot and turn this. Real sharp. Right to the end here, and I will back stitch this just to be safe. Now this is the bottom back side of the driver's side of the seat. So this goes down below, and it's going to wind up hooking underneath like that. So we got this side done. Trim off these extras. Trim these off so they don't get sucked down there and jam the needle. Turn the whole thing over to this direction. Let it overlap about an inch and a half or so on the first pass of thread sewing. Hold those threads and so now we need to do the extra stitch like we did on the seam, and it goes on the side and front, not on the seat. And so that means that this overlap needs to fold towards the front. I need to move the needle back over to the other side. Oh, wait, no. For the direction I'm going, I need it on that side. This is a curve. It's going to be challenging. It can help a lot if you trim a little bit of this out to allow it to curve. We call these darts. And that will just relax the fabric a little bit. Won't have as much there to bunch up. Alright. So now we'll put this under here. Be kind of tricky with trying to keep this curve. Now, I'm just going to get this started and backstitch it, and then I'll try harder to hold everything in place. Okay. So we got to pull on that to open it up so we get that curve. Make sure that your inside's folding to the correct side. Alright, so you can see how this is turning out. It looks pretty decent. Okay, this is the foot that was on the machine. And then I remembered I had a walking foot. You gotta take this screw out to pull this off. And then you push this on and you make sure that its little plastic lever goes up over this arm. And then you tighten the screw back down. And this is what I should have been using all along. And so if you have this with your machine, you should very well use it. See, that guide's so much easier now. Okay, so when you're going to go over this seam, I mean already just doing this, we're going through 3 layers of vinyl. But now this is an extra fold here. So we got like one spot of like 5 layers of vinyl. And it will not power through it. It can't walk over it. So what I wind up doing here is I'll lift the foot. And then I'll pull that up. I'll drop the foot. I'll manually pull it. I'm just manually turning everything. And then I'm going to release the foot to get some tension out of there. Pull it a little bit. Just manually push it. Until I get past this thick spot. All this excess thread. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers of vinyl I'm trying to go through with a machine that just cannot do that kind of stuff. But starting out on the top of it, I should have a little bit better luck with it. And I can't backtrack it through this, backstitch it. It's just too much for it. There we go. I could try to back it. Must have another mess underneath it again. Yeah, see that? It's because it can't get it tight enough when you have to lift that. And We would just be so much better off having a professional machine right here. But I have enough thread going through there that I'm confident it's not going to come apart. See, that won't even fit underneath the foot. It's just too much for non-commercial machines. Going into a corner, and that's why it's bunching up so bad. This is a lot easier if you're using a fabric instead of a vinyl. And back to another sharp corner, so I need to trim darts on this. I did have to adjust the tension on this new foot because it really couldn't get the right tension. It was all zigzaggy on the bottom. And so with tighter tension, it makes it so it's straight on the bottom and the top. Can't do an 1/8 inch on this foot though. That's one downside to it. Almost there. And that's it. Alright, so stitching's all done. So we'll turn this right side up. Go. You want to make sure that your new custom seat cushion is where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to kind of press over that front frame. That around the corners and sides. And a new cushion that doesn't have a whole lot of give in it. So you can kind of see how this is going to be. I gotta trim it. This cushion is just a little too big. So I gotta trim it down a bit. Just this has to go all the way down over the frame, like that, and then get clipped. So It's going to compress it all. But you can see that it's going to fit pretty decent. Okay, to make this easier, I'm going to remove the seat brackets. Just pull it back so that there's foam at the front. Like that. So that way when it compresses, it goes over the frame there. And this goes up here. For this go around, I start in the back and I push the cushion all the way forward so that it'll hopefully overlap when I draw this up tight. So I got my clips in all the way around. I would push down on this while I pulled the vinyl to make it tight. It's pretty comfy. When I redo it in the future though, I'm going to use pleating foam to create a pattern, and I will just keep pleating foam all the way across it to help with that front frame edge. I guess it's time to put the bracket back on, stick it in the truck, and the adjuster didn't work too well. You can adjust it by tightening this. So I'm going to grab that, and then I'm going to try to bend this to take up a little bit of this slack. Like that. Oh, like that. Hopefully that's not too much. We'll find out when I put it back. Alright, time to go back in the truck. Well, there's the new bottom. It would not work with the late model back, so I'm going to have to reupholster this back to match it. But it'll do okay for now. Didn't turn out too bad. Yeah, this project turned out alright. I would recommend a much better sewing machine with a wider stitch capability, and to use marine grade vinyl, or at least automotive vinyl. This vinyl I'm using is not, but for $6 a yard, this got my seat to where I can sit on it, and it'll do until I can afford the really nice cloth and vinyl that I want to put in this. So this project cost me around $35, because I already had a sewing machine and I already had the burlap. When I go to do it again, the entire seat's going to cost me around $130 I think it'll be $170 roughly. And so I just needed to make it so I could sit in this thing